Good evening. Hello, Jay. Hello, Roger. Hope you're doing well. Let's wait a couple more minutes and we'll get started. Well, Matt. One more minute and we will get going. Okay, let's get started, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. We're going to be starting modules 12 this week. That just leaves us with one more session or two more sessions. I believe one more session and then application deployment is going to be module 14. Yes. So next week we are going to pretty much end the class on module 13. And what I'm going to do, since Heroku is going to stop their free accounts on the 28th, I think it is, I am going to move application deployment to next week. I want to get that in there before that happens. In fact, I think I can cover these two at the same time. If not, then I will I'll do part of module 13 the following week. That's on the 30th. But we will see. That's going to leave us module 14 to cover the final project. So that's going to leave the 30th to cover the final and the 7th of December to cover the final. So we're going to have about 2 weeks where, you know, if you have any questions relating to the final, I'll also do some examples that will help you with the final project. And that will be that. Any questions on what we're going to be doing? All right. Any questions on the lab assignments?
Well, I have a question about the deployment.
Yeah, Roger.
Since I've already deployed an app, wait, I don't know, the third week is, can I submit that one? You kind of, so I can
actually
catch up basically.
yeah, actually there's going to be no assignment due for that one. So that one is just for your information. Okay. So we won't have any lab assignments having to do with application to deployment. You'll just see how I go about that. And that'll be that. Yeah.
So it's possible that I know Node.js works on Google Cloud, so that may be a possibility. It's free with the card. They they charge you a penny if you're a good boy or good girl. They charge you a penny on your card to make sure it's active. That's what I've noticed.
I think I have an account. So so when you sign up though, do you get charged if you spin up a Node.js
So
server?
that I'm not too sure. I've been using it under Python for a long time, but like I said, I think it's a serverless solution.
I see.
So I haven't done the Node.js part, so I don't know whether I would get charged just for doing something simple or not. So
yeah, well, I'm gonna have to find another solution for at least next semester. So yeah, I'm going to be looking into that. I'll also see what Heroku's free, what was it? They said something having to do with Heroku. You can get you can still get a free account through another service. I don't remember right now off the top of my head, but I'll be taking a look at that. I don't want to go into Amazon Web Services because that's just
that's too difficult.
It's too difficult. Just to spin up a node server, it's gonna take I'm gonna have to spend like just like one whole week just going over how to get the Amazon Web Services going. So I don't want to do that.
So I've been getting the Heroku emails. If you want, I could post them.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that'll help. All right. Any questions on the lab assignments? Anything you need help with? Feel free to ask. If not, then we will get started on module 12, which we're going to continue on AngularJS, and we're going to be covering the topics of form validation, this concept of repeater, and how to make Ajax calls using it. Since we no longer are going to be using jQuery to make our Ajax calls, we have to use the Ajax tooling that comes with AngularJS. So we're going to be taking a look at that. All right, so this is sort of one of the reasons why I didn't really cover any validation, or at least on the client side, form validation. That's because in this module 12, we're gonna be using AngularJS's form validation, and that is much cleaner solution than trying to do your own form validation. We're going to be starting an empty project. Oh, actually, something I also want to mention is we're going to be doing this form validation and going over the concept of this repeater in this example. And then once I'm done with this, the next half of the class today, I'm going to be converting the to-do application that we created, and I'm going to be converting the client side from jQuery to AngularJS. So this client side that you see here, where it's currently using jQuery, as you can see, we're using jQuery here. This is all going to be converted to AngularJS, so it's going to give you a good idea of how to go about it. When you have an existing application like this, that's the client is written in jQuery, how to go about converting it to AngularJS. All right, so let's start with the form validation stuff first. All right, so the first thing I want to do is I want to angularize my example project. So I'm going to go to AngularJS.org, and we're going to get the AngularJS script, which is this one right over here. All right. Okay, and we're going to paste it. AngularJS. Okay, that's going to be our script. Let's now add the AngularJS directives, which is one, we're going to start with the HTML tag, and we're going to add the ng app, and we'll name it my app. And then we will define the view and the controller. It's going to be in the body tag. So ng controller. This would be just main controller. Right. And then we have to create our AngularJS instance for this application. So we're going to do that by creating a var, my app. We're going to set it equal to Angular module and my app and any external plugins, which we don't have yet. All right, and we're going to refer to my app. We're going to create our main controller. And we are going to bring in the scope service. All right. All right, that's all we need for now. Okay, so we're going to be creating just a form registration page. So we're going to have a name field, email field, and a password field. And we're going to add some validation, client side validation to it. So let's start out here with a div, which is going to be a container. And inside of the container, we'll have another Jumbotron. Let's set some set the padding on this to an even 3. All right, let's see here. Okay. No errors. Okay. All right, so to get form validation working with AngularJS, we need our form elements in a form tag. So that's one of the requirements. The other requirement is that the form must have a name attribute. So we can't get around that. We have to have a name attribute on the form tag. So in this case, I'm just naming it my form. If you have more than one form on your page, you're going to have to give it a unique name for each one of them. something like, I don't know, form 1, form 2. So we need name for the form, and we need a form tag. So let's go ahead and create our first form element, which is going to be for the full name. So we're going to connect this to the model as well. So we're going to set ng model, and we're going to have it saved to the model under full name. And we're going to set the type to text and set the usual CSS classes for Bootstrap. And we'll set the placeholder to full name. Okay. So far, we don't have any validation going on here for this input. Let me make sure it looks correct. It does. Okay, so to get validation going, well, I'll take that back where I said that we don't have any validation going on. In fact, we do. We're just not using it. So by just having a form element with a name, and something I forgot is that every one of your form elements must have a name as well. So they don't need to have an ID, but they do need to have a name. And this name can be either the same as auto, or it could be unique. However, I usually keep these the same. There's really no reason to name this something else versus that. So the form elements need to have a name, and the main form element needs to have a name. So by just having this here, we are already getting form validation. However, we're not using it in any meaningful way. So how that exactly works is like this. In our scope, or we can say in our model, we have an object now that has been automatically created for us. And in that, in the model, we have an object, and that object is under the field of the name of the form. So in this case, we gave the form my form. So under scope, there's a my form object, and in that my form object are going to be all the form components that are in that form and their states, their validation states. And what we're going to do is, for now, we are just going to output that entire object. So we can do that by just outputting my form. Okay, so again, this my form comes from the name that you give your form, and this gets automatically added to the model, and that's the scope. Okay, so that is already there for us. So if we hit run, you're going to see an object being displayed here. Unfortunately, I can't get it to display in a clean way. Let me see. Let me do JSON filter, see if that helps. No, not really. What I could do actually is, let's see, JSON pretty fire. Or, oh, I'm sorry, fire. Let's use this here, and we'll see that object. So let me grab this object, and we'll put this object here, and we will get a formatted version on the right here. Yeah, I think this is good. Okay, so let's take a look at this object. You see the object has a name of my form, right? That's just the name of my form, right? This form object here, form element here. And then it has these 4 states. We have a 30, pristine, valid, invalid. And these are inverses of one another. So there's really only 2 states here. Not 4. So let's draw out the ones that are in inverses. So these 2 are inverses and these 2 are inverses. So if one of them is true, the other one is going to be false, and so on. Right? And that goes the same with valid and invalid. So if valid is true, invalid will be false. If valid is false, invalid will be true. Okay, so these states here will tell us if something in the form has changed. If we have a pristine true, it means that we haven't changed a thing on the form. So when the form was first displayed, it is the way it is, right? It hasn't been changed. We haven't changed any of the form components in there. We also have this invalid and valid and invalid, and this has to do with the validation of the entire form, right? Because these fields here are in the root of this object. So this invalid has to do with the validation for the entire form, not a specific field. We then have fields, right, that use the name of the fields that we've assigned. So for example, we have this full name, and if we go in our application, we have this input, and we gave the name of this input as full name. So by having a form element, we now have a key value in that object under that same name. And here we also have similar things. So with one additional one. So let's draw those out. Okay, so we have, these are inverses: touched, untouched, pristine, dirty, and valid, invalid. Right. So again, these are just inverses. If one is true, the other one is going to be false. So what does untouched or touched mean? That means that even if you click on that field, the touched is going to be set to true. So you could use this touched and untouched to determine if the user even clicked on the field or selected anything on that field, even though we didn't change anything. Okay. So if it's untouched, it means that we haven't selected that field yet. If the field is pristine, it means that the content of that field hasn't changed. As soon as we change the content, then pristine will be set to false. And then we have valid and invalid, and these two have to do with the validation for this field. Okay. If we have any validation errors for this field, they will end up in this error object here. So this error object has to do with any validation errors that are part of the full name. This error in the root of this object has to do with all errors for this entire form, right? So the stuff here in the root are related to the entire form, and these fields here are related to this specific form element here, in this case, full name. Okay, so I hope that makes a little bit of sense. We're going to now see how that object sort of changes. Since we're using AngularJS to display out this object, if there is any change in this object, we will see that change here. Okay. So let's take a look at the touched and the untouched. So here, touched is currently set to false. So it looks like I already selected that field. So let me refresh this. So let's see here. Yeah, so currently untouched is set to true. As soon as I click on this field and I hover away from it, you'll see that now untouched has set to false, even though I didn't change anything, right? And now touched has been set to true. Okay, so now let's keep an eye out on this pristine and already here. So currently pristine is true because we haven't changed a thing on this input. But as soon as we type A, you'll see that the pristine is now set to false and already is set to true. And the pristine is also set to false on the entire form because at least one thing in the form has changed. Okay, so these are the states that each one of these form elements are in at any given time. All right, so now let's see how we can add validation to this form element. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make this form element required. So what we're going to do is we're just going to set required like that. I believe you can also do this by doing ng required and setting it to true. I believe this will also work like that. And if we now refresh this, we will see that we now have a new field. So again, it's not easy to read this object here. I do understand that. So let's go back to the JSON beautifier. And let's paste that object in there again. And let's take a look at the full name. And now you will see that there is required here somewhere. Error. Under the error, there is required set to true. And also under the main object, there is a required array which that we can use to read which form elements are set to require. However, we're not going to use that. So now that we have set required to true, if we remove it, we'll see under, well, it was already removed, which is why it was already set to true. So under the full name error, we have an error, and the error is that we have a required field, right, that is set to true. So it means that this field is required. So one of the validation problems with this form is that the full name should be required. Okay, so now how can we use that, right? How can we use this object? Well, the way we're going to use this object is we're going to create HTML right below it. In this case, let me create a span here, and let's use the bootstrap badge component. So we'll set a badge. We'll make it a red badge, and inside of the span, we will put required like that. So if we just run this as is, we will get required. However, it's not connected to anything, so it's going to always be displayed. What we want to do, though, is we want to show this span element if there are any, if the required is set to true, right? If this required is set to true. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, and we're going to use the ng show, and we're going to say if my form dot full name dot error. So we are going inside of that error object. We're going inside of this error object. And inside of that error object, if required exists or is set to true, then we want to show the span element. Okay. So now when we refresh it, we still get required. However, now the display of this span is dependent on this object's field. So as soon as we begin to put something in that field, that automatically goes away. And if we remove everything, right, this required comes back to true, and the span is then displayed. Right, so I hope it makes sense how this works, right? So what we're doing is we're just taking advantage of this object here, right, that holds all the state having to do with this form. And in this particular case, we are seeing that if any of the validation error contains something called required, if that is set to true, then we display this span, and this span is just going to show required. We can also do like a star or something like that, right? So if you want to do that, you can also do something like that. But that's up to you. Okay. Okay. We also have other options when it comes to validation. So let's take a look at one of my pages here. I believe it's under here. And if you take a look under validation, for input type of text, which is what we have right now, these are all the validation options components that we can include. So here, required, ng required is what we used right here. But we can also use these, so min length, max length, and also regular expressions, which is going to be this ng pattern here. So let's, for example, use this max length. So what this will allow us to do is specify a maximum character length for this field. Right, so we'll set max length equals to, let's say, 20 characters, right? We don't want it to go over that. All right, so let's run it or refresh it and take a look at this object here. Okay, and let's see what happens when we go over 20 characters. Once we hit 20, we should get something in that error object. And here it is, max length. I believe it's that one, or I'm sorry, it's this one here. max length is now set to true, and that's under the pairs, right? So max length is set to true, but when we reduce the number of characters, so it's below 20, that max length is no longer there. So again, what that means is that we can use that max length to display something, right? So let's create one other span here, and this time we will read under the error the max length, right? So if the max length error is true, then we have exceeded, right? So we can say something like exceeded max length of 20, let's say. So let's see how this works now. Okay, so first we have required. As soon as we begin typing, the required goes away. And then when we exceed the 20 character limit, we now get exceeded max length of 20. Right? And then when we reduce it, that goes away. Okay, so let's leave that full name there, and let's work on the next field. So we're going to have another input, name, email. We also want the email to be required. So ng required, set to true. And then we're going to set a regular expression for this one. So we're going to use this NGE up pattern for that. We're going to set the type to text. And we just need a couple more things. Class to form control. And set a top margin 3 and set a placeholder here of just email. Okay, so we want a regular expression here. So let's go to regex 101 and we'll find a regular expression for email. Library, email. Let's just use this one. Just use this one here. Okay, so we're gonna copy. We're gonna copy this. There. Copy that. And when we insert a regular expression, it has to be in between 2 forward slashes. Okay, so we'll put 2 forward slashes, and the regular expression goes in there like that. Okay, so now let's take a look at this object here again and see what we get. First of all, I have some classes here that what am I missing here? One control class. Oh, I probably didn't spell out control. That won't work. Okay, so let's see now. All right, so we have email, and of course, email is going to be required. Let's put an invalid email. Right, so we'll just put A here, and I know that's going to be invalid email. We need to find the email field, and again, it's not easy to read that. So let's bring it over to our here, and we don't see the email field. So maybe I have it there somewhere. Let's take a look. I make sure I have name, email, ng required, pattern. What am I missing? Oh, the ng model. I need it to be part of the model. I believe that's it. Ng model, email. There we go. As you can see, this object grew by a lot. Right? Okay, so let's put an invalid email in here. And again, I will copy paste this over to our tool. And let's take a look at the email field, right? So we have an email field here, and we will see that we have an error, and the error field name is error, right? Which means our expression that we put does not match the input. Okay, so we can now do the same thing here. So we'll copy one of the span elements there, and we will refer to my form dot email dot error dot pattern. Right? If the pattern is true in the error, it means that the input doesn't match this expression. So if that's the case, then we can put the invalid email. And we also set this to required. So let me just copy over this span element to the required. That's going to go there. And I just need to change this to email. Okay, so. Okay, we have name and email required. If we put A, that's going to be an invalid email. Okay, if we put my email at lamission.edu, now it is no longer an invalid email. Okay, so that's the email. And let's do a password field as well. So we will name this password. ng model password. We want it to be required. We also want it to be a strong password. So we need to find a regular expression for that. So let's do another search here for strong password. Okay, so I guess we can use this one here. Or actually, let's use this one here. I'll have that up there, so we're gonna have to refer to that. All right, so I got that expression, and that's going to go in between the two forward slashes, right? So that's going to go right there. Okay. So this is also required, so we need to set that. And if we have a pattern error here, right, it means that it doesn't match the strong password there. So if that's the case, we want to then display the requirements for it. Right? So we want to display this here. So let's copy that part, and that's going to go in there. And we need a break, line break after each one of these. So we do that. Okay. All right, so let's see how this works now. Okay, so we have required fields. For the password though, okay, that doesn't look too good. So let me change this from I needed to change this to a div here, not a span. So we have a div, with an alert and a red one. So alert danger. There we go. Okay, so if I now begin to type, this comes up, right? So you must have one lowercase, one uppercase, one numeric, one special character, and at least 8 characters long, right? And as soon as we meet the requirements, the error message will go away. All right. Okay, so now we have individual components here for each one of our form fields that are going to tell the user what's wrong with that field. Right? We also want to be able to show an overall sort of thing where if there is at least one error on the form, we want to let the user know that there is an error on the form. You need to first correct that error before you can go on. So let's add that. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a div element here, and it's going to have a class of alert, danger, and set a margin. And what we want to take advantage of for this div is the overall invalid field, right? And what I'm referring to is under the root of this object, we have this invalid, right? And this invalid has to do with the entire form, right? So what we can do is we can say we want to show this div. So we're going to use ng show when the form's invalid is set to true, right? If the form is invalid. If the form is invalid, this div is going to show. And if this div shows when the form is invalid, we want to state something like invalid form fields, correct to continue. Okay, so now we get invalid form fields, correct to continue. So let's put a name, a correct name, a valid name, a valid email, and a valid strong password, right? And as soon as we do that, you see that div goes away because the form is no longer invalid. Okay. We still have one more thing we need to do, and that is, let's say this form has a submit button, right? And we don't want the user to be able to submit this information if there are already invalid fields in here. So let's see how we can control that. Okay, so we're going to set a button. We're going to create a button here with the class of button, large button, and primary. And we'll do something like submit. Okay. Yep, that's going to look something like that. However, we don't want to be able to submit, right, if there are any validation errors, right? So we either want to hide this button if there are any validation errors, or disable it. Okay. And we can either, like I said, we can either hide it or disable it. So let's go with the disable option in this case. So we're going to use the Android.js directive of ng disable. Okay. So again, what this ng disabled is gonna, the way this will work is if we have a truthy or a true value in here, then this button is going to be disabled. If we don't, then it's going to be an input. So what we can do now is we could use the same form invalid, right? So if the form is invalid, if this is true, then this button is going to be disabled. So we can just put that same thing in there like that. And now if we refresh it, you see that the submit button is disabled. We can also, like I said, use the ng show if we want. So we can do ng show. And actually, in this case, we want to do ng not show, ng hide, right? You want to hide it if the form is invalid, right? So if we start out, it'll be gone. And let's put a valid name, email, and password. And as soon as everything is correct, the submit button is now displayed. And as soon as we have some kind of a validation error, submit button is gone, and we get this information here. However, I don't like ng hide in this case. I prefer ng disabled. And that's just because I don't like things going in and out of it, like being removed and added onto the page. Just doesn't look that good to me. So I would want it to be like this, where the submit is disabled until everything is correct. And now,
Do you have time to show how a captcha device will work on this one? I've done it in
CAPTCHA, we're gonna have to use a third-party component for that. I could do that. However, I'm not gonna do it today for sure,
Yeah.
because
Okay,
we
maybe
have a
next.
lot to go over, but we will have enough time. Not next week, but the week after. So please remind me, and I'll go over it. Okay, so now what we want to do is, now we are all done with this object here. So let's just go ahead and remove it. We don't need that displayed, right? But just keep in mind that that object is there all the time, right? Okay, so now the idea here is that when we click on the register button here, right? What we want to do is we want to take, let's just take the name and the email, and we want to add it to a table here. We'll have a name field, and we'll have an email field there, right? And when we click on submit, we want the name to go there, the email to go there, and just for fun, let's have a button there. So when we click on this button, greet, it'll say hello, and it'll use the name of that row. Right, so we'll go over how to do this kind of thing with Angular JS. All right. So let's go ahead and create that table down here. So div class, again, since I already have a container, right? I'm already in there. Jumbotron, let's just create another Jumbotron. Okay, and we'll set a padding again of 3. All right, and we want to create a table, right? So we'll start out with a table HTML element. We'll set a bootstrap class of table. We'll give it a theme. That. And a table must have a table head or a T head. So we'll create a T head element there and a table header element, TH, for each one of them. So we're going to have 2, name and email. And we need to have a body. Right? So a T body is now going to have a row and table divisions, TD elements of the actual information, right? So for example, Jane Smith, and we'll have another TD element of Jane at gmail.com. And we'll have yet another TD element, which is going to be a submit button. So we're going to have a button element there of type button. Class, let's set the classes. Primary, and we want to make sure we float this to the right hand side, and the button is going to be called greet. Let's just view this to see how it's going to look, right? So it's going to look something like this. When we click on submit, we're going to take these items, add it to this table, and when we click on greet, we're going to say hello, Jane Smith in this case, right? Okay, so this is just an example here, right? This table row. However, this stuff above is going to remain, right? This is not going to change. We have name, email, those are not going to change. So the only dynamic part of this table is the row, right? Is this table row, which is going to be dependent on this information we enter in the form. So let's comment this out since this is just an example. And what we'll do now is when we click on the submit, we're going to add the name and the email to an array. Okay, so let's do that. So the first thing I need to do is on the button, I need to define the ng click, right? And we'll call a function called add, let's say add account. Okay. So if we create a function in the model called add account, we have to make sure we define that in the scope. Okay, so scope dot add account is equal to an anonymous, in this case, arrow function like that. Right, so far pretty straightforward. And like I said, we're going to need an array, right? So when we add a new account, we want this information to be stored in an array. So let's go ahead and define that array. Again, that array is going to be defined in the scope. So scope dot, let's call it accounts, and just an empty array. Right, so empty array to hold accounts. And then when we click on the submit button, it's going to call this add account. And when we add account, we're going to add this information to this array. So pretty straightforward, scope dot accounts dot push. Right, we're going to push a new object because we're going to store two fields, name and email. So we want the name. Now, how do we now read the name here? Where would the name be stored? It'll be stored in the scope, right? Because we connected that input, right, to ng auto, and we put it on their full name, right? So all we need to do is just refer to scope dot full name and email, the same thing, right? Scope dot email. Okay. So that's all we're doing, right? When we click on submit, all we're doing is we're adding a new object inside of this array, and that object is going to have two fields, name and email. The name is going to come from the value from this input. The email is going to come from the value of the email input. Okay, so now that we have an array of these accounts in this accounts array, how do we now use that accounts array to create HTML components, right? So if you think back of how we did this before with jQuery, if we had something like this, right, what we would have to do is in our script, we would have to loop through this accounts array, right? And for each one of these objects here, we need to create new HTML, right? We have to then append this information to that HTML. And then at the end, we have to append that to the DOM. And then once we do that, the information is going to display. Right? The way we do it in AngularJS, again, right, our controller does not deal with the DOM, right? Our controller deals with this scope object. So it means that if we put things in this accounts array, what we need to do now is we need to use this accounts array in our view. And here's how we'll do that. So we did say we need a table row there. There is a AngularJS directive called ng repeat. So by setting this ng repeat here, what's going to happen is whatever is inside of this table row, including this table row, is going to be repeated a certain number of times. And what we can do is we can sort of, you can think of it as we're looping through this array, and each time we are looping through this array, a whole block of HTML is going to be repeated. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to say ng repeat equals in the string. We're going to say account, and we can call this whatever we want. This doesn't have to be called account. We can just say a, for example. We're going to use the keyword in, and then our name, the name of our array, accounts. So this accounts has to be the same name that we gave here. Right? So this is our array, accounts is our array, and this A is just what we're gonna call each one of these objects that's in this accounts array. Okay, so again, this can be A, this can be X. In this case, I'm just gonna call it account. Okay, so we're gonna say account in accounts. Right, so yes.
Is this basically a template language then? Template?
Yes, that's correct. Yep.
So a Google App Engine uses this same idea.
Yes, I believe it does. Yeah.
Template.
Google App Engine. Yep. Yep. Yeah. So if we have two elements, two accounts in this accounts array, then this table row is going to be repeated 2 times. So you can think of having 2 table rows, one after the other. If there are 10 accounts in this accounts array, then this table row is going to repeat it 10 times. And what we can do now is we can use this account here, right, to refer to one of those accounts. So let's create what we did in here. So we had a table division, a TD, right? And we had the name of the account there, right? So the way we now refer to the name of the account, we use AngularJS, expression there. We're going to refer to account dot name, right? So this account dot name is gonna refer to this object here. We gave it the field name of name, right? So we are referring to that name now. This account is the whole object, right? So account dot name. But we're going to create another table division there. Account dot email. Okay. So let's just hit run on this and see how it'll work. Okay, so Jane. We'll hit submit. As you can see, we get Jane and Jane at gmail.com. What's really neat about this is that the view will always be in sync with this array, which means that if we add a new object into this accounts array, that object will automatically be created in the view. Or if we remove an object from this array, that the view is going to reflect that array, right? So it's always going to be kept in sync. So what that means at the end of the day for us is that, again, the controller is not dealing with the DOM, right? All the controller is going to deal with is this array to keep track of what's inside of this part here, right? So we either add things to this array or we remove things from this array, right? And when we remove things from this array, it'll get removed from our view.
So which method is preferable? This method over what we did in the first few weeks of the class? Is the DOM stuff going away?
That's a very good question. And there's no right answer to that. It's just okay, so the main advantage of having control of the DOM is that you have control of the DOM, right? You have full control of your page, right? You can add, remove things, move things around. The DOM is under your control 100%, right? You have full control over it. Whereas in this case, you give up a lot of control, right? You're going to give up a lot of the creating of the DOM elements and all that, and you have to adopt to the client framework, right? It means it's sort of you have to give up a lot of control here, right? You're going to give up all DOM control because in this way of the way we're doing this, we can't deal with the DOM. So you can't go ahead and start, changing stuff around this table by accessing the DOM because, the client-side technology has control over that. And if you do change something in the DOM, there is a pretty high chance that the client-side technology either is gonna not know what's going on. There's going to be some synchronization thing that can cause problems. So you're going to give up a lot of control. However, look at our code, right? We're just putting something in this array, right? And by putting something in an array, we get to see it in the view. Right, so the amount of code that we have to write goes down a lot. So again, what's the right answer? Well, there is none because you're going to give up a lot of control to get something like this, right? So what this is going to give you, speed, right? It's going to give you a lot of speed, so you can do a lot in your UI with a very small amount of code. So.
So what I've done before is using Google Cloud. The backend is very similar to this. where it's a templating language. But what I really used a lot was to sort the columns by, say, alphabetical or last name, first name. And on that, I used a nice person wrote a JavaScript library that did the DOM manipulation. So I don't know how it works, but I'm stuck with it. So I do want to get rid of that
Yeah,
DOM
that's
manipulation.
that's the other thing is if you go with this, for example, then you're stuck with it, right? So you have to always use this client side, and you can switch to some other framework, but you have to redo the whole thing, right?
So there's no way to use this and put some code in that'll change the order of each column as I want?
No,
Not way?
you have to use this completely at this point.
Oh,
You can't refer to the DOM anymore. I mean, you can. It's not going to stop you. It's not going to say you don't have access to the DOM. You can still access the DOM and make changes to the DOM, but you don't know how it's going to behave at that point, right? There's a big thing there that you don't know what will happen under every certain condition. It might do a certain thing, and you don't know what's going to happen. It might be okay, right? But you don't know for sure. So that's one of the drawbacks of a client-side technology, is that when you adopt it, right, you have to sort of stick with it, right? Yeah. So you always are gonna give up some control there, right? And in this case, you're gonna give up a lot of control, right? Because you're not even dealing with a DOM, right? You're gonna deal with how to this ng repeat to repeat elements, and ng show, ng hide, and all that stuff, right? So that's just how it is, really. So all right, let's do one more thing here, since we said that we want to create a button here for the delete. That's going to be another table division. And like I said, we're going to create a delete button. So we'll create a button here. Just type a button, class of button primary, load it. Okay, and the name of the button is greet. Okay, so when this button is clicked, right, so that means ng click, what we want to do is we want to call a new function called greet, and we can actually pass the name into it. So we can just pass the account dot name into this function called greet. Right, so now we need to create it. So scope dot greet is an anonymous function that's going to accept a name, right? So now we have a name argument for this, right? And then all we're going to do here is just an alert, right? Alert name, like that. Or actually what we wanted to do is we wanted to say hello, right? Hello name. Okay, so let's give it one more try here. Okay, let's add at least two. So add Joe Smith, joe@gmail.com. We'll leave the password the same. Okay, so we have Jane and Joe. Let's click on greet, hello Joe, and greet, hello Jane. Let's take a look at the HTML for this thing and see what's going on here. Let's inspect it. And let's keep an eye out here on the T body. Here, you're going to see that we don't have anything here yet, right? So let's go ahead and again, we'll do this one more time. So we're going to submit. As soon as I submit it, you'll see that a new table row gets created in here under the T body in here. So as you saw, we got a new table row. If I expand this final greet button, you're going to see that it's not going to have the actual name in here. Right? So it's greet account dot name. So what's going on is when we click on this button, it's then going to be evaluated, right? It means that this name that we put in this greet function is not going to be directly put in there. Right? It'll be passed into the greet function after we have clicked on it. And at that point, it'll be evaluated. Okay. That's all I wanted to do for this example. All right. Let's go ahead and now convert our task application, the client side at least, to use AngularJS. Okay, so we're not going to be dealing with the server, APIs, anything like that. All we're going to be working on is the endpoint here. All right, so let's see what we need to do there. Okay, so again, we're going to need AngularJS. So let's go ahead and get AngularJS, angularjs.org. We will download, copy the script, and let's add it in our application. And then what I want to do is I want to not remove it completely, but let's comment out all of our existing jQuery code. And that way we can compare it to the AngularJS version at the end to see how it compares. Let me remove this comment here so I could just make a single comment. So we'll comment there, and we'll go all the way at the end, and we'll comment that entire script out, right? So this commented script here was the script that we were using when we clicked on add, right, to make a get post request. Edit was at request, delete was the delete request. And we also had the code, remember, to draw it out, right? We had the load to-dos here that had to create the list item elements, the button elements, right? The edit button, the delete button, create event handlers for these, right? We have the event handlers for the edit and the delete. And then we had to append them to the list item. And then finally, we had to append the list item to the DOM, in which case then it displayed out. Right? So we have all this stuff going on here. All right, so we added our script there. Let's make some more room here. All right, the first thing, ng app, my app. We need to create a view, ng controller, main controller. We're going to need the ng init in this case because we want to load we want to load our tasks when the page loads. So we want the ng init. And when the page loads or page completes loading, we want to call the function, let's say, load tasks. Okay. All right, so let's add our script. All right, let my app Angular module, my app, any external plugins. We don't have any. Let's create our main controller, my app controller, main controller. Let's bring in, we're going to need an extra service here. So we're going to do scope service. Okay, so that's something that we're going to need. And we're going to need a new service that we haven't seen before, the HTTP service, right? So this HTTP service is going to allow us to make our HTTP requests, or get, post, put, delete, get, post, patch, delete. All right. Okay, so let's create the scope function for the load tasks. So load tasks, right? That was this is the function that's going to be called when the page loads. Okay, so here we need to what? We need to make an AJAX call to our get endpoint. Okay. Now we cannot use jQuery here. The reason why we can't use jQuery, you might ask, is remember with jQuery, we would have to do something like this, right? jQuery AJAX, right? AJAX takes an object, and we have the URL type and all that stuff. And then finally, we're going to have a success, right? We're going to have a success callback, right? That's going to look something like that. The problem here is that we would have to refer to the scope service inside of this success callback. However, the context where this callback is going to occur does not have any information about this thing called scope. So if we make changes to this scope object in this callback, our AngularJS application is not going to know about it. It's not going to keep, it's not going to see that scope object has changed for it to then redraw the view. So that's the main reason why we can't use jQuery's jQuery AJAX here, is because in the success callback, we're going to have to refer to scope. And scope, again, can only be used inside of our controller. By putting scope here, you might think it's inside of our controller. However, it's really not inside of our controller, because this success gets called after the fact, right? It gets called once it makes the AJAX request, once it completes asynchronously, right? Then it's going to call the success. And at that point, scope is not going to have any on text, right? It's not going to be inside of our main controller. It's not going to be kept in sync, so it won't work. So instead, we're going to use this HTTP service, which is going to allow us to do essentially the same thing, but this is aware of that scope object. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to refer to HTTP. And the way this works is we just do the request type. So if you want to do a get request, it's going to be HTTP get, HTTP HTTP patch, HTTP post, and HTTP delete. All right, so we want to do a GET request, and we put our endpoint path here. So it is API/todos. Then we're going to use the then syntax. That's the promises, and that works by the then syntax, and I'll explain what this means. So if this is a success, if this GET request to this endpoint is a status of 200, then we are going to get the result. So we're going to get the result. And if it's not a status of 200, the catch is going to be called instead. Function error. Okay, so we have this then catch. Right, so then if this callback is called, it means that this was a success. If the status code is like 400, 500, then the catch is going to be called back with the response in the error. Okay. The other thing we need to keep in mind is this result object. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a console log of this result object to see what's in there, because this result that we're going to get back is not the same thing we would get back if we use Ajax. I'm sorry, if we use if we use jQuery, the result is going to be the object that was returned, the actual response. In this particular case, this result contains some more information. It's going to contain the status code. It's going to contain some other information that if we want to use, we could use. All right. Okay, so let's go ahead and load this. Application, and we're going to open up the console, and we have this redeclaration of app. Do I have it happening twice? App. Squared. Anyway, I think it did work. I'm not sure why we're getting this error. Line 42. I don't know, but here is that response. So this is that result object that we're seeing here. And here, as you can see, it has the status code of 200. It has the status text, okay. And our actual information is inside of this data field. So if we expand out this data field, we're going to have our four tasks, right? Learn MongoDB, shopping, hiking, and learn JSON web token. So this is our array, right? This is the information that we're going to have to display in the view. So what we're going to do is we're just going to set some field in the scope. So we're going to say scope dot tasks equals to result dot data. Right? So again, what we're doing is we're just assigning this array of our tasks to a field in the scope called tasks. Pretty straightforward. Okay? So now let's work on displaying this array. And at this point, we should have an idea of what we're going to need to do, right? So we're going to need to use the ng repeat, right? To repeat what? We're going to repeat a list item. And in the list item, we're going to read the objects in that array, right? And then we're going to display those objects. Okay, so we no longer need IDs. Okay, so we can remove the ID there. And let's create that list item. So list item, class, it was list group item. Goes out that list item. So what we want to repeat is we want to repeat this list item. So ng repeat, right? Task in tasks, right? This tasks again is referring to this tasks that we set in the scope. All right, so now inside of this list item, all we need to do is display the task dot task. Again, I shouldn't have named this task because now we have task dot task. Let's do task item. So task item dot task. All right, so that's going to display the task, and then we're going to need the edit and the elite button. So let's just make sure this works for now. So let's refresh it, and as you can see, we get all tasks now. Right, again, all this code got replaced, right? All this code got replaced, right? We don't need to create list items anymore. We don't need to create buttons. We don't have to create event handlers. Well, we do need to create event handlers, but we don't need to append things to the DOM. All that got replaced with a simple get request to our endpoint, and all we're doing is we're assigning that array to a field in our scope. Right? And then we have this ng repeat that's going to just repeat this list item for each one of those objects in that array. And in this case, you can display the task field inside of that object. All right, so let's create the edit and elite buttons, which are actually here. So I can just copy and paste them in like that. All right, so we have edit and delete. We will, let's see, what should we do first? We'll come back to the edit and the delete. For now, let's just make sure that they are there. Okay, so it's not gonna, if we click edit or delete, we don't have anything going on yet. So we'll do that in a bit. Okay, so now let's work on the add here. All right, so we have to come up here to where we are reading the task name, and we want to take advantage of our form validation that we learned. So let's give this a form name of my form, and this input needs to have a name. We can remove the ID. We don't need the ID anymore, and we'll give it a name. Well, first we'll assign it to the as it's auto. So ng model equals task, and name is equal to task as well. Okay. Then we want to display any required errors. So we want this to be required. So ng required, we set it to true, because we don't want the user to leave the task empty. So span class badge danger and required. We want to make sure that's required, and we only want to show this, so we're going to use ng show if my form task error required is true. If the error of required is true, then we're going to show this required. All right. We also now need to change how this add button works because we are no longer using jQuery for that. So this is the add button. We no longer need IDs, so ID goes away. And when we click on the add button, what we're going to do is we're going to set up the ng click. And we are just going to call the function add task. We also want to make sure that this add button is disabled if the task is empty. So we can take advantage of the ng disabled. So we want it to be disabled when my form invalid. If the form is invalid, then disable the button. Okay, so button is disabled, task is required. As soon as we begin to put something in a task, the add button is enabled. Right? So that takes care of the form. Now we need to create the event handler for the add button, and we called it add task. So let's define that. So that's going to be defined in our controller. Scope add task is an anonymous function. So we need to create an object, right, that uses this field and do a request to our web service. So first, let's do let new task is equal to an object. Just going to have a field of task, and we're going to read the task from our scope. So scope dot task. Okay, that's this field here. Okay, and now we need to do a post request to add the new task. Again, we're going to use the service HTTP. So HTTP dot post API to dos. Now we pass in the new task in this second argument here. Okay, so post to this URL, and this is the object we pass in. Something else you want to note here is that we are not we don't have to convert this to a string. So we don't have to stringify this object. We can just pass it as an object. This post is gonna stringify it when it does the actual request. Okay, so that saves an extra step there for us, right? We don't need to do JSON or stringify here. Okay, we can just put the object there as is. Okay, then the same syntax, then catch syntax, function result, catch, function error. I just realized that if we do have an error, I didn't do anything here, so let's alert it out. It's going to be error data message, and that's going to go in the catch down here as well. Okay, so once we do a post request, right, it's going to create the task, and our result is going to include that new task. So how would we go about then displaying that task? All we need to do is refer to our tasks array and just add the result.data. Right? All we do is add that new task object to our array. And as soon as this array changes, our UI is going to reflect. Once we do add it, though, we also want to remove the task that was put in here. Pretty straightforward. We're going to refer to scope.task equal to an empty string. All right, let's see if this works. Okay, so we will put test, add, and we get test. Again, no DOM code or anything like that going on here, right? It's just one thing that we're doing here, right? We're doing a request of post, we're sending the object. And when we get the result, all we're doing is we add that to our tasks array. Right, so all of our CRUD operations are going to deal with that array. That's all we need to do at this point, right? Our view is then just going to automatically reflect. When we add things to the array, when we remove things from that array, or when we make a change to that array.
I have a question.
Yes.
About 15 minutes ago, you introduced the HTTP.
Yes.
Do you need to import that? Because I'm looking at the Angular docs,
Mhm.
and it calls it at Angular/common HTTP.
Common, right? Common is
Yeah.
the core. That means it comes with the script.
Okay, so you never had to.
You don't need to import it. No.
Okay, thank
So
you.
this HTTP service is inside of the core script, which is this through the server. Yeah,
So we had to make sure we pick the right library then.
You're going to need the core. So this script that I have is the core script. So this, as long as you include the core, then you have access to this HTTP service.
Yeah, it actually says that it's relies on the XML HTTP request, which is Ajax. So
yes,
now it makes more sense.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me make it clear. Post Ajax. We are doing Ajax here, right? Ajax here, Ajax here. All right. So that only leaves the edit and the delete, right? And I think I'm going to have enough time for that, so we should be good. All right, so let's work on the delete first. Okay, so when we edit or when we delete, we are going to need the ID of the task that we want to edit or delete. We know our object has a ID field, right? So what we want to do is when the edit or delete button is clicked, we want to pass that ID of the task into a function. So then we can have access to that ID. All right. So that means that in our view, for the edit, for the delete and the edit, when we define the ng click here, we're going to need to do that for the edit and the delete. For the delete, we're going to call the function remove task, and we're going to pass this remove task function the task item dot underscore ID, right? That underscore ID is the unique ID of each task, and that's going to be in that object. So we want to pass that ID into this remove task. And the same thing goes here, edit task, and we're going to pass in the task item underscore ID. Just like that. Okay, so let's define the remove task function and the edit task function. All right. Scope, remove task, arrow function. We're going to accept the ID of the task. Okay, so now that we have the ID, we can do our AJAX request. So do a delete AJAX request. So we're going to again refer to our HTTP service, http.delete. The first argument is going to be our endpoint URL. So let's use a template string for that, just to make it a little bit a little bit cleaner. So API dot slash to-dos slash, and we're going to now add the ID in the endpoint URL. Now then, function result catch function error. The error is just going to display out the error. And now when we get the result in the then, it means that that task was removed from MongoDB, which means that if we want to remove it from our UI here, we have to remove that object from our array. Okay. Okay, so let's do it with a standard outlook here. So we'll do for let I equals 0, I is less than the number of elements in the array. So that's going to be in our scope dot tasks dot length I plus plus. And we're going to now compare in an if statement. If the tasks array element I, if the ID is equal to the result dot data dot underscore ID. Right? So what we're doing is we're just seeing if that item that was removed, which is going to be in this result, is in that tasks array. If it's in the tasks array, then we need to remove it from that tasks array. So it'll be removed from our view. So that's what this if here is gonna check. It's gonna say it's gonna check to see if the ID of a task that's in an array, if that's equal to the ID of the task that was just removed. Right? If that is true, then we need to splice out that object from the array. Right? So we can do that. Scope dot tasks dot splice, and we know it's at element I, and we want to remove one element. So splice just removes something from an array. So this is an option that we can do. We can also do something else as well. And that is we can call this function load tasks again. If we call the function load tasks again, it's going to do another Ajax get. It's going to get the new array, which is going to exclude the item that was just removed. And it's going to set the whole array to the tasks in the scope, and it's going to redraw out our UI. However, that's not as efficient because what we're doing there is we're making another get request, which we don't need to actually do. So that's going to be expensive. And we are changing the entire array, which means the entire UI needs to be redrawn. Right? You know, as opposed to doing it this way, where we are just removing the element from the array. We are not making a completely new request. Right, so doing it this way is a lot more efficient. Okay, so let's see if this works. Let's refresh it and we will delete. And as you see, it works. All right, and then finally, we are going to edit the task. So let's define that, scope.edit task ID. As you can see, things are looking about sort of the same, right? I mean, we still have the four TUD operations. It's just that we're handling it in a new way, right? We're not dealing with the DOM, right? We're just dealing with this array. That's it. That's really the only change. That, and also we are using this HTTP service to make the Ajax calls. And that's it. Those are the only really two things here that have changed. Okay, so edit task. Again, we're going to need that the new updated task. So we're going to say let modified task. All right, it's going to have a task that we want prompt the user. So we'll use the prompt function. Enter new task. So that's going to be our new object, and now we need to do a patch request, right? So HTTP dot patch, and again we're going to use a template string here /API /to-dos, and we're going to embed the ID in the URL. And then we're going to send over our change task, right? That object. Then result, catch, error. The error, we're just going to alert out the error. And again, the patch, what's going to happen is that this result is going to contain that updated task. So our goal here is we need to update that task in the tasks array. Right. So again, we're going to do the same sort of thing. We need to do this. We need to do a loop. However, in this case, we can just do a for of loop instead, because we don't need the I index in this case. Here we did need this I because we used it in this splice. But in this case, with the patch, we don't need that. So for this, we could just use a standard for loop. So task of scope tasks. And we're going to just do if statement here. So if the task underscore ID is equal to the result dot data dot underscore ID. If that's the case, we're just going to update the task, right? So task dot task equal to result dot data dot task. And that's it. Let's refresh it. And whoa, we got an error. Let's see what the error is. Has to do with what we just did because everything was working before. And where's my error? I have a semicolon here. I think that's my error. Yep. Okay, so let's make a change to one of these. Edit. Oh, that's not working. Okay, let's see what's going on here. Scope is not defined. Line 90. What's going on? Oh, I have this outside of my controller. That's not going to work for sure. So that needs to be inside of our controller. Okay. There we go. No more errors. Edit shopping to no play video game. And Elite works. And there we go. All right, and that's it. So let's finally let's compare the code that we have now to what we had before, right? So as you can see, it's pretty clean, right? We have distinct blocks of code, edit task. We have no HTML in these at all, right? We don't see any HTML here. And compared to what we had before, all that, right? All right, so hopefully that makes sense. All right, and finished exactly at 8 o'clock. That was not planned. All right, are there any questions?
I think when we did this before, wasn't everything connected to MongoDB? And this is all in memory?
No, it still is.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's all in memory. But the
It's not in,
MongoDB.
no, it isn't. It's not. So this is our tasks application that we did in module 9 or 10. So
Okay,
this is storing it there. So
okay, that's fine then.
we
Okay.
have our endpoints, we have our MongoDB connection, we have our endpoint handlers. So what we did today is just the client side, right? Just
Okay.
this index one. Okay. It seems like we're not storing it in the MongoDB, but you have to remember this is on the client right now. What we're doing, all this stuff, is on the client. So this tasks array that we have going on,
Yeah.
this is just a, you can kind of think of this as a cached version of what's in storage, right? So this is a cached copy of it on the local client that's stored. And when we do our for CRUD operations, all we're doing is we're just making a change to that cached cache array, right? We're making a change to the cache but at the same time, you're still updating it in MongoDB. So we're still updating in MongoDB. It's still being changed there. When we add a new task, it's still being added there, right? But at the same time, we have this, the client has the same information that's being stored, and that cache is only used for the UI, for the view. Right?
So it's still efficient going through the entire way to find one index. That's okay because it's cached in memory.
It's cached, yeah. So this loop is extremely efficient compared to, so if we compare this OR loop here, where we're just looping through the array, this is a lot more efficient than if we made a new request, right? Any HTTP request we make to the server is going to be much slower than what we do on the client that's on the actual client, right? So we want to avoid doing requests as much as we can, really, because it's not cheap, it's expensive. Each time we do a request, right, we got to open up ports, TCP connections, HTTP protocols. We have going through the web, through all the switches, infrastructure of the web, to hit a server, and then the server has to handle the request, and then all that's really expensive, right? And this loop, this is really, this is not even close to the expense of a new request. So yeah.
Gee, everyone's left.
Yeah, I hope I didn't scare everyone away.
Since we got some time, unless Jocelyn has a question, I wanted to post my code. It's on the internet, and you can just look at the table part. I can show you tell you how it works. Just
yeah, sure.
Okay, so it's let me find chat. Okay.
You'll find out. Okay. All right. Awesome. Yeah. I will be there. I'll be there this Friday at 5:30. So if you want to join, feel free. We'll see you there.
So you see the URL?
Yeah, I do see the URL. All right. I think I saw this before. Did you put this URL in the group chat before? Actually, no, I don't think I've seen this.
So you can go to any year, then go view by source. Then actually, before you do that, click on say last, and you can see how the names get sorted.
Oh yeah. Oh, cool. Okay.
So that is what I do not want to lose. When I'm trying to transition this website into something less than 20 years old. So.
Yeah, this is an ideal thing for Angular AS, really.
So if you click on view by source, I can show you the line that's I'm trying to. So if you go down until right a little bit more, class table class equals sortable. So that
class equals sortable.
Down.
Is it in this area here?
Line 86.
86. Okay, I see.
So that's a huge JavaScript library.
Yeah, that's coming from, I'm assuming, this script file here, right?
I didn't write it. I stole it, of course.
Oh, this was written in 2007. Wow.
Yeah. I did not want to have to rewrite that.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, Angular JS has this feature right in there. So you don't need to recreate that at all. So
So it can be done in AngularJS?
oh yeah, easily, very, very easily actually.
Is it
And
the same idea? Because
we'll do that next week. It's actually planned for next week, but
okay.
I could show you how it's done if you wanna see it.
No, I can wait until next week. So
Okay.
I I'm behind on the assignments, so I had to catch up on the assignments.
Okay. Yep, but yeah, this year can be done. This year can be done with AngularJS.
So I'm looking for a paid Angular site that's the cost is similar to this website, which is like maybe $100 a year. Do they even exist?
How is this information currently being pulled? Is it just in the HTML file?
It's my MySQL.
Okay, so
But
it's MySQL. And what's on the server? Is it a PHP application,
Yes,
ASP?
PHP.
It's PHP. Okay, so you're using PHP on the server. When you hit this, I'm assuming that it uses this 2022 that's in the URL to
Yeah,
do
it's
a
just
select all from a table where year is 2022, and then it creates this table in PHP,
yeah, pure HT,
and
pure
the
PHP.
client will receive it, right?
Yeah. So since I know MongoDB, I can easily put this into
Yeah,
MongoDB. It's no
this
big
is
deal.
yeah, this is something you could do. Actually, from what we have learned so far, you should be able to create this with the exception of being able to do this table sort.
But Node.js is not supported on this.
Oh, in this environment,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's the
well,
problem.
that's going to be a problem. Yeah, so you can't use that. So you're going to have to find something else.
That's what I'm looking for.
Okay.
Because on another website, I'm using Google Cloud as the back engine for the database, and it's cost me nothing over 5 years because it's such a low hit
Yeah,
database. There's
it's
no
not that
cost.
much, right? Yeah.
But the front end is pure, I want to do everything in Node.js, so I don't have to do things in 5 different languages.
Yeah,
So
that makes sense. So for your final project, do you want to just redo this and there or
you mean just
not?
do exactly the same thing, but we'll go to MongoDB?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I can do that. Okay.
Yeah, that way you kill two birds with one stone. You get the final project for the class, and you'll create this application in MongoDB and
I
using
think I can do it. Yeah.
Node.js, MongoDB. So
It wouldn't be, it would be, well, actually, I don't know how to call MongoDB from PHP. That's, I
you
don't
wouldn't
know.
use PHP anymore at that point. So
But
you're gonna have to use Node, at that point.
this website doesn't support Node.js. That's the thing.
Right. So you can do your application and applet for now. Right. So you can use this too.
Okay. So,
Right. You can use this. This supports Node.js, and you can connect to your MongoDB instance. And then you can then find a web host that hosts Node.js at some point in time and go ahead and do that. But you could still do it in this. So
in theory, if I get it done before Heroku closes down at the free part, I can post it on Heroku.
you can put it on Heroku if you want. Yeah, but I mean, for this class, I'm not looking to have your application in a out environment. So that's not
Web, web play would be okay too. So I can.
Yeah.
So actually, if you look at the code, the database is a JSON feed. So what I do, I from the database is actually streaming via JSON.
from
I
from IS from ISQL, you mean?
Yeah, it's just using my PHP code.
How come you're doing it that way instead of just reading the raw
Because when I
result?
work on this on localhost, I'm working on the same database that I have in the cloud, or no, at the website.
Okay.
Otherwise, if I want to work on the latest stuff, I have to download the database, and so
you can connect a local PHP application to a cloud iSQL.
well, yeah, I know that using AWS, but I want to learn new stuff. I don't want to do this to get this stuff working. It's like I'm using JavaScript, I'm using PHP, and I'm using Ajax, I'm using.
I see. Yeah, yeah.
So on Google Cloud, I have pretty much the same stuff working totally in Python and their database.
I see.
So, but on this one just here is pure all PHP. It's because at another place I was working on, they didn't have a database on that account that they had.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
So I had to go, okay, let me figure this out. So I just put the database with Google and I access it via JSON.
I see.
I mean, it's a hack, but it works. So all I have to do is get this database working on Replit using Node.js.
Mhm.
I could probably do that. Well,
Yeah,
famous
no, I think
last
that'll be a
words,
good
so.
thing for you to do as well. Just, you could do sort of two things at the exact same time. So like I said, you can sort of kill two birds with one stone.
So the final piece I have to do is figure out how to do the PayPal and Node.js. Then I have all the pieces. Because if you go to the
Well,
page,
PayPal is not going to be connected to Node.js in any way because PayPal is going to be a client side thing. So they're going to probably give you some script files that you have in your application that's going to be in your client, not the server, because that service does not rely on your server. So you could be running ASP.NET, PHP, Node. It's completely independent of that. So there is no server-side component to it, is what I'm trying to say.
I do use PHP to access PayPal. I use
For what though? For
I'm sorry, MySQL. I use some
MySQL.
Yeah, I use some
To access what?
MySQL a library written by another guy in MySQL to use it to go to PayPal, and then I had to give them like a
That's
URL to come
not
back.
a conventional way to do it though.
Say again?
No, I said that's not a standard way to do it. So
What's the better way?
the way to do it is you do all of your PayPal related code on the client.
So what
But
language?
again, I'm not exactly sure how you're using it in your application though. So that could be the issue here, that I don't fully understand how you're using that service with your application. If I get an idea of how you're using it for your application, then I might be able to know.
So what I basically did, I went to PayPal's site and they had a PHP SDK on how to do it. And it took me a while to figure it out.
But yeah, but I mean, like, as far as that goes, what exactly are you,
So what I do is on the person fills out a form with